Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tosh Customs, and today we'll be looking at my custom Mezco Cyber Knight. This guy's insane. He took an incredibly long time, but I'm just super happy with how he turned out. There's not much more to say. There's just a lot of detail, and maybe I'll just move him closer. You guys can take a sec to look at them, soak it in. But we're going to start with the accessories, and then we'll move on to the body, how everything got constructed, and the steps and processes for him, as well as some of the inspiration, because there's a lot of different source material I was looking at to figure out how to put this guy together. So with that being said, I'm going to put the body off to the side here, and let's take a look at our accessories. So we're going to start with the weapons, move to the hands, and then to the heads. So we're going to start here with his pulse rifle, or his energy cannon type weapon. This is based off the cable plasma rifle, but obviously it's been repainted and retooled a lot. So we have this bayonet up front, and this was from a Mythic Legion's dagger. I cut off the the hilt guards as well as the handle, and then shaved it down so that it would actually match the edge of the gun, fitted it, glued it onto the gun, and then after that put some sculpt over it to reinforce that. And then after that, much later on, I decided to actually add a shoulder strap, so the shoulder strap wraps around nicely around the bayonet, so that just adds some more style to it. Obviously the gun's been repainted, so I sprayed it matte black first, and then I dry brushed all the main plating areas with silver. Then after that, I came over it with this sort of gray military green, sort of a forest green. And so you get a little bit of a military look. And the backstory of this guy is that he's a soldier, and me and the customer wanted to create a really cool opponent. Not necessarily a bad guy, but just an opponent for our wandering samurai from earlier on in sort of like our Cyberpunk series. And so we wanted to take some medieval influence and try to make that futuristic and fit that into the cyberpunk world. And so I think we created a really cool futuristic soldier who has some, medieval European knight influence in there. And so I'm very happy with how he turned out. And so this is just one of those weapons that we decided to do that with. Obviously, we have some gold highlights here. And a main part of the color scheme for the figure is gold. So I wanted to have some gold accents as well as some blue energy highlights running through the weapon as well. Moving to the sword, obviously we still have our gold highlights, but I want to talk about how this metal got painted. And this silver metal has the same treatment as the dagger does, as well as the hammer we'll get to in a second. But I wanted to create a really worn, aged look. And as you can see, you're getting a little bit of gold coming through there, as well as you're seeing the silver and all of it. But the cool part is, when you look at the blade from a distance, you're not pulling out individual colors. They're sort of fading in and out as you rotate the sword around. And so the way I was able to get that effect is everything got sprayed black. This sword originally had a purple hilt, and then everything else was a bronzish color. So I ended up removing the paint from like the hilt or the grip. And thankfully the plastic underneath is black. So even though I sprayed it black, if there ever happens to be paint rub, you'll never notice. And then after that, let's talk about the sword paint. So after it was sprayed matte black, the first thing I did was I dry brushed it gold. Originally the sword was going to be gold. And then, as the character evolved and stuff, I chose against it. So since I had the dry brush of gold already, I went over and did a dry brush of silver. And so because both are dry brushed, there's spots where they shine through, and so you're able to see the gold through the silver as you look at the sword. And I think that's such a fun, really cool effect. And then after I dry brushed both of those coats, I actually went over with Gunmetal Gray. And the Gunmetal Gray acts as sort of a blender. Because the gunmetal is a smooth coat over everything, it really tones those clashing colors of the silver and gold down and puts them all under the gunmetal. And so that's why the sword looks like it has, it's like a dark gray iron sort of tone to it. but as you look around, you can see that silver and the gold come through. And so that's a really just great effect. And I honestly stumbled upon it. It wasn't really on purpose. It just happened to be that way. And I was like, oh, this looks awesome. The next thing is sort of this light fade through the sword. What I did was I had a deep sky blue and I had white, and I diluted both of them with thinner till they were pretty watery. And then it was just dabbling them into the center, like the midline of the sword, and then using my brush to blend them together. Because they were so watery, the tones mixed like within this crack. And so you get this nice fade between the white and the blue, and you get that on both sides. And so I'm really excited for that, and I think it's a really cool way to kind of show light shining through the sword. And that's really fun. Otherwise, the hilt got painted or dry brushed with some gold, and it's nice because you get that silver and gold through it too. It has a base of silver, so you sort of get that, a little bit of that color shifting. The gold's not such a strong gold that it's overpowering, and I do like that a lot. Coming to the next thing, we have this energy blade here, and this magnets onto his left arm. I was inspired by Doom and Gundam to add this accessory. And it started off with, I just need something to add to the suit. I don't want him to just look like he has Batman gauntlets on. So I was like, okay, what can I do with this? And so then I was like, okay, we're gonna put this energy sword on. I was inspired by Doom because I thought of the Doom Eternal arm blade first, and I thought that was really cool. And then I thought of Gundam and how the Gundam actually have those, I guess for lack of a better word, lightsabers that they can pull out of their arms or energize within their arms. And so I combined those two ideas to make this magnetic arm blade here. The blade and sort of like the base grip itself is pulled from the Marvel Legends Taskmaster figure. I think specifically like the Udon Taskmaster or whatever he's called. And that came out a couple years ago. And unfortunately, I think that figure's a little bit more expensive now. But thankfully, I have fodder sitting around after years and years. And then this whole connector piece that magnets onto the arm is all custom sculpted. And so I had to cut down part of the sword so that I could fit this new sculpted piece on top. The next thing we have is a grenade launcher or a shotgun, whichever one you prefer. I have grenades on the figure, so I'm calling this my grenade launcher. This is from the Supreme Knight, I think they called it the Equalizer rifle or the Equalizer gun. And so it's been repainted. It got sprayed matte black. And then after that, I hit it with some more of that green gray. And it's a little bit hard to see on this one because it's not as predominant throughout the whole color scheme. So I feel like just visually you see the gray more. But it is green gray, as well as some more of that gold highlight with that silver undertone. And obviously we kept the blue highlights coming through. And then the last weapon we have is just this plasma pistol, which is, just the Supreme Knight grappling gun. And it was just like, he has the spot on his belt, I'll include it. He doesn't totally need it considering the arsenal he has already, but it's just a nice addition. So also hit with that green, gray, and some of that black and silver. So there we go. Moving on to the hands, we are using the Supreme Knight hands for this figure. And so because of that, because we have the trigger hands on the right, this figure is right predominant, or this character is right predominant. And so you'll be able to see that when we talk about the balancing of the armor in a little bit. But for the hands, they were all sprayed matte black first. Excuse me. A little burpee there. Oof. And then after that, I dry brushed the tops of the hands with this gold, and then I actually black washed the gold. And that's what mutes the gold down, so it's not nearly as bright and as shiny. Then after that, I hit it with the chrome silver highlights on the knuckles and the finger guards. And so that is all the rest of the hands have had that same treatment through them. And so they have that gold with that wash and then the silver. And so I think they turned out great and fit the figure very well. We'll take a look at the hammer for a second. Nothing too crazy about this guy. It used to be a sledgehammer that got resculpted. And originally I was going to use this for Ronan the Accuser that I started probably like a year, maybe a year and a half back, and I just never completed it. And so I ended up taking it and using it for the knight. So I sculpted this, this center bolt, and then also sculpted it to a flat edge here. And I like that, it is a little uneven. It adds some wear and some chipping and tear to it. This hammer got the same paint treatment as the other blades, except I did hit it with some more silver dry brushed silver along the edges there. So as you can see, it gives it a more worn look as he's swinging it around and it's scratching against stuff. So we have that. Coming to the heads, I'm going to start with this, I'm just calling this the Dark Knight or Evil Knight head. The idea for this was we wanted to, mix our medieval theme. We wanted to, I don't see him as a bad guy, but he's definitely an opponent. And so if, our samurai is kind of on this journey for peace, and this guy's hunting the samurai down, he has to look a little bit more like war. And so we chose a lot of spikes and sharp edges to represent this character. And so, as I talked about earlier, or I briefly mentioned it, because we have a dominant side, being the right side, I wanted to work on this asymmetrical design throughout the whole character. And so one of the ways I was able to do that was make the helmet asymmetrical and actually have the face plates on either side be a little bit different. So we have this wiring that comes through the head and runs to this eyepiece. And as you can see, we actually have a full plate on the cheek of this side that has this wonderful scar, that's been cut through it. And on the other side, we have a more humanoid looking face plate and mask here. And I really, really love this edge along the side of the face, because look at how paper thin that line is right there. That was just so fun to sculpt and make. I think it's perfect. I don't think you can really sculpt any thinner than that. It's so, so shallow. But that's all you need to, get that layer of difference right there. So yeah, very, very fun to sculpt this. Some of the inspirations for this guy, me and the customer were looking at pictures of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. I pulled some reference from Shredder from TMNT, as well as some, I feel like there's some, inspiration from World of Warcraft in there, as well as obviously trying to get sort of this cyberpunk feel. And I really also love this mouth guard right here, where like the nose runs down to those, that sort of skull mouthpiece motif. On one side, we have the human eye, that's all just whited out, and we have some nice black gloss around it to make it feel like there's some really nice depth in there. And then obviously the other side, we have our metal with our wiring. For the spikes, we weren't able to sculpt them this nice and sharp. They're actually just like these blobs of clay that I sculpted over and just sort of pulled them up. And then after that, I went over in post and shaved everything down. And that's a mix of a Dremel as well as hand files to get them nice and smooth like that. So we have that head. The other head we have, I wanted to go for something a little bit more fair, a little bit more human, and maybe a little bit less evil looking to give some balance to the character. Because at the end of the day, he's still a soldier, he's a knight. We're not trying to design a bad guy, we're trying to design an opponent. And so with that, I have this really nice visor piece, and I feel like it pays some nice homage or homage to medieval knights. Those front visors with just a couple lines through them so that they can see through, but otherwise their face is protected. Obviously, he's not wearing a full face helmet, but I think using this as a visor is a nice little way to make a nod to that. I also sculpted some little side armor pieces, so it's almost like the collar rises up to the top of his face. And then also sculpted some strands of hair. If it wasn't obvious, this head is based off the Bruce Wayne head from the Sovereign Knight Mezco figure. And a fun little thing that you can do is you can actually pop this visor off to reveal his face. And as you can see, we have some nice scarring and dirt detail all over the face there. He's been through battle and he's worn. And obviously, just based off the paint that we've been seeing throughout the character, definitely dirty, definitely been in the midst of battle. And so, these scars and dirt is just to prove it. And the way this stays on is this whole sculpted piece is actually just fits into the eyes and bridge of the nose. And so it just holds on by friction. And so I sculpted this piece on and then heated it up and peeled it off later. And that's how we're able to have it stick in there. This is this idea, or just sort of using friction to hold the piece in. As you can see, it's nice and steady too. It holds in there. Is based on sort of the same technique I did for the assassin, or the archer, the D&D archer that I made a little while back, using that same idea of the shape of the face to create some friction around the sculpted piece so that it holds still. So that is the accessories, and so I'm going to move all these out of the way for now, And later on in the video, I will sort of load him up with his weapons so that you can see how everything stores, because I think he can hold everything on his person, or nearly everything. So that's pretty exciting. But for now, I'm going to take it all, drop it off to the side. And I'm going to put on this head, because honestly, between the two, this head is my favorite. All right, so let's take a look at the figure now. And I'm going to start off by saying, holy cow, I did a lot of sculpting for this guy. Everything in terms of the stuff I sculpted is asymmetrical, down to the wiring on the thighs. Obviously the gauntlets are not the same. We have one with, that tiered, those tiered blades on it. In case he loses his sword, he can punch someone and add a little bit more impact to it. But then on the other side, we have our magnets, and we have this new shield bracer piece with some more wiring running through it. So I'm gonna talk about what was existing parts, and then we'll talk about everything that got sculpted. So, oh, by the way, this head is based on the Marvel Legends Prowler, in case you were wondering, where it's based off of. So the parts that are reused, well, obviously the body is a Mezco body. It is the Baron Ben's body. And for those who are wondering if you ever want to customize on the Baron Ben's body, it is the same as the Blade body, and it just has this overall suit put over it. And so, funny enough, the Baron Ben's body, there's a zipper that runs through the middle, and if you unzip it, it actually has this little undersuit on it as well. So, but it's on the Blade body, and so, that should help give you some idea for proportions and stuff like that if you want to customize on it. So the Ben suit got dyed black, and I do a quick dye thing, and that just allows it to be that gray color. I basically dip it in for 5 seconds and pull it out instead of leaving it in there to soak up the dye and fully recolor. I just want to kind of, tint my cloth lower. But anyways, back to the existing parts. We're using Deathstroke legs, and we did have to replace the internal lower leg on Ben's for the Deathstroke part so that the boots would be compatible. We are using Tactical Batman knee pads, Tactical Batman elbow pads to make the knee pads. We are using the Tactical Batman thigh armor here, to make the thighs, obviously. This is the Supreme Knight belt that's been repainted. We have a bandolier of grenades that connects to the shoulder, and that is from the Ultimate Terminator figure. I think it's from NECA, and it's Terminator 2. And then the other thing that is reused is our hands and our gauntlet pieces, which are from the Supreme Knight. The only other thing is this neck is from the Sovereign Knight, and that actually just pops right into the Baron Ben's body. As long as you remove its existing neck piece, you can just drop it right onto the ball that's sitting inside. And it connects perfectly, no issues at all. So those are the parts that were used. Also, the Supreme Knight gauntlets peg right onto the Ben's forearms. Sorry, I keep burping a little bit. Apologies, pardon me. But they peg right onto the lower arm. You don't need to switch anything out there. They pop on nice and easy, no hassle. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I'm going to use the term original sculpt a lot, and what that means is that it does not have an existing base piece. Basically, it did not exist in any form before I sculpted it. So there you go. We have our terminology out of the way. Also, the other thing is this this skull piece right here. The base plate for it was a 3D printed part by DTG Figures. Originally, I was going to use it for a Jedi custom, and we ended up not needing that piece, so I just had that 3D part laying around, and so I used it to sculpt the skull shoulder pad. So, let's talk about what was originally sculpted now. So our chest plate, let me scoot this bandolier up so you can see more of it. Our chest plate here was completely original sculpt. Let me move the bandolier back down. Our collar, completely original sculpt. Our right shoulder, shoulder pad collar piece, all original sculpt. Left side, original sculpt. All of this all the way down. So his whole upper body armor, all of it is originally sculpted and completely unique. I opted for this because I wanted this character to feel very, very original. And I was also running out of chest plate armor, not gonna lie. So I was like, okay, so what, how do I solve this problem? I don't buy new stuff, I sculpt it myself. That's what we do as customizers. So all of it is original sculpt. And I have a couple videos in the past where I've sculpted on fabric, but not a ton, so I'll go over it again, especially since this is done in a much larger scale than normally, or than I normally do. And so you put painter's tape over the suit, and then, like for instance, for the chest plate, all I did was put a big blob of clay down and just spread it out over the area that you want the piece of armor to cover. So once you kind of have like your general blobby outline, what I like to do is I have an airbrush needle, but you can really use any tool, and I sketch out the shape of or like kind of like press in the shape of the armor that I want. And so that gives me a frame of reference so that I know, where everything should align, what it should look like at the very end. So I did a center line down the middle, so I knew where the center of my chest was, and then after that I outlined the frame of the armor. Once that base layer is dry, you peel off the painter's tape, and then you peel the painter's tape off your clay. So now you're just left with your clay blob with like the sketch marks in it. And so then I used my X-Acto knife, a Dremel, as well as some hand sanding files, and I sanded the blob down. And so this bottom glossy black right here, that was my base layer. So as you can see, there's 2 more layers that sit above it. And so this guy in total, just the chest piece alone, took 4 separate sculpting sessions, because I did my base layer, and then after that I did the secondary layer of armor, and then the 3rd layer of armor, and then after that I sculpted in all the details, like these extra little tabs where the elastic meets, this little arrow like outline piece right there, all sort of the wiring, as well as that little heart engine right there. And so there was a lot of extra work that had to be done. On top of that, as I'm sculpting these layers, I'm putting in details like these little pieces that glow, all the bolts in the armor, as well as some of these scratches. And so with that, there's a lot of care and intentionality. You can see there's also more scarring and wear on the suit that you can't even see because of the bandolier. But hey, it exists. We didn't shortchange. We don't cut corners. All the detail is there on the suit. So that's how you sculpt armor in general. So if you're going to cut it down to a couple rules or a couple steps: 1, painter's tape; 2, press your blob down and make your outline; 3, cut your blob and outline down, or your outline down, and then after that add details, and the details, however many sculpting sessions that needs. In the case of like this left shoulder pad, for instance, I believe it was like 6 layers, because to make this collar side, it's 2 steps already, because you make your initial blob to get your shape, and then after that you have to sculpt your collar piece over it, but what that makes is a seam. It's not going to be a smooth curved transition. You want it to be a hard angle, between my shoulder pad here and, let me get him to stand, between my shoulder pad here and my collar here. I want that to be a clean straight edge. So because there's going to be a seam there where the 2 pieces meet, that's what I have this nice blue ribbon of sculpt there for. I sculpted that, smoothed it, made it really, really thin and even. And so that actually covers the seam. And so when you're looking at it, you still get that very hard angle, but now you're also smoothing out that edge. And that's the same thing for this side. So in this case, the shoulder pad was base layer 1, like top collar piece 2, ribbon running through was 3. Then we did our outer edge, which was 4. And then we did our spikes, which was 5. And then we did our circuitry, which was 6. And at each of those detail steps, if there's anything uneven, always make sure you sand it down. For instance, when I was doing like this outer lining, so you see how that 2nd tier raises up along this edge. I had to sand the outside again down because, as I was putting that strip there, some of it was overlapping past the armor. So I had to sand everything down again once it was dry. And so it's a very meticulous process. It can be tedious, but I mean, looking at this guy, I would say the effort was totally worth it. And so same stuff for the collar and the rest of the pieces. I was laying painter's tape down, making my general shape. And then after that, it's a lot of sanding and a lot of cutting in order to get it to the way you want it to look. I'm not going to go over everyone step by step because that's just way too much time and I don't want to bore you guys, and there's a lot more engineering that goes into this guy. But understand, that is the labor. You're looking at many, many, many sculpting sessions in order to get everything looking right. Even this wiring on the thigh here was 2 sculpting sessions. I have to sculpt in the wires first, and then I sculpted and cut down the band that went over some of these ports. So even that is 2 sculpting sessions in and of itself, because you have to have one dry before you can, sculpt something over it. So, just as you're looking at these pieces, understand a lot of these individual components have to be done one at a time in order to get them to look right. And so, if you want to attempt to do this or, take these techniques, just expect to be putting in that kind of time. You're probably going to be spending, multiple days just to construct the armor, not even paint, not do anything else, but just to get the armor looking the way you want it to look. Enough about that. Let's talk about some inspiration. We already talked about, Gundam and Doom. Obviously, with this knight armor, the big question was, how in the world do I take something medieval themed and how do I bring it into the cyberpunk world? Cyberpunk has such a, Japanese emphasis on it. And so how do I take something European and make it feel futuristic and techy? And I wanted him to feel different. As I say, there's Japanese influence in cyberpunk and a Japanese, cultural push sort of in that style and in that genre. I wanted him to feel like an outsider. He was a soldier and, he's sort of finding his own way. I wanted him to have some mystery behind him and not feel like he totally fits. He's not a street thug. He is not, he's not some kind of mafia boss or a rich guy. He is, he's a bounty hunter. He is looking for the samurai. Part of our backstory is that they used to actually fight alongside each other and they just chose different paths. And so he is designed to both be futuristic in his look. We have a lot of these glowing elements that we see in Cyberpunk, have a lot of our wires and, robotic reinforcements and whatnot. But I wanted him to feel very, very distinct in the world too. I don't want him to fit in. I want him to stand out in that way, but still have a presence because he is fighting the samurai. The samurai is a big dude. So, all of those things had to come into the design influence and sort of the thinking as I went about it. And so even into the armor and painting it, making it feel worn and dirty so that we get the idea that he's not new or he's not young to the battlefield, but he's seen a lot and he has a lot of experience and carries a lot with him, into whatever combat situation he finds himself in. So pulling that medieval design, if your primary hand, in this case his right hand, is going to be the one carrying the swords and carrying the guns and whatnot, then this side has to be lighter. It has to be more, has to have a higher range of motion. And something cool about this is that this figure keeps his entire range of motion. He can kick up. If I rotate the thigh armor, he can kick up higher. That's about as far as the figure kicks up in general. So he gets about 90 kicking up. His knees bend all the way on the double joint. I normally don't do an articulation breakdown, but I feel like this guy looks so hefty that I should do it. The reason why he's actually able to lift his arms up all the way is for how the armor works. And so I guess I'll explain that right now. So the collar piece is glued down to the zipper and the Batmobile or the Batman cowl up front. That's glued down, and as you can see, it doesn't move as I jiggle it around. It doesn't pop up or anything. The chest piece itself is on elastic that just wraps around the arms here. So that's how the chest plate stays in, which also gives the chest plate some flexibility, but it's also held in by the bandolier. So it can move, it can flex to the body as need be, but it's not loose. From the collar, there is a piece of elastic that stretches from the center collar and stretches all the way down to the shoulder. That allows the this upper shoulder collar piece as well as my actual legitimate shoulder plate armor to be connected to the collar, so that they all stay aligned. If they were each just, looped around with elastic in a separate piece, they would fall out of alignment and you constantly have to keep adjusting. Because they're connected to the collar based on a center line, they'll always be aligned. The next thing I did was for the shoulder pieces, I did a loop of elastic around the arm so that they bend and follow the arm, as you can see there. And as you can see here, bends and follows the arm. The thing that I did for these upper collar pieces, this one doesn't move as much because it's held by the bandolier, but this one does. You get to shift it back and forth. And that allows, obviously you can kind of change it as you want, but I like to have it shifted up so that the shoulder pad can tuck right under that edge there. And so all of that is to increase his range of motion. And so there's a loop of elastic under this shoulder pad, and the loop wraps around that center line that runs down. And so it allows it to shift up and down, to your leisure so that you can flex his armor more. So all of that is to keep his range of motion the same despite, having all the armor on him. So he can also, lift his arms up and forward and bend and do everything that he used to, even with the suit on. And that was a big thing. I like to keep the articulation on my figures preserved. And so the engineering had to be very, very precise as I was planning. It wasn't something I did in post. I already thought of how I wanted all the construction to go so that you'd be able to move everything internally. The other thing, the belt is also on elastic to the armor, which helps bridge that gap between the belt and the chest piece, because I didn't want it to just be all empty. And so this just helps something to break up the underside of the suit, but it also means that, your belt's not going to slide down too much or slide up too much. Obviously it'll hit the bandolier if it slides up, but it won't just fall all the way down his waist because it is a larger belt. As you can see, it's a little bit loose, which allows his legs to bend, but it also keeps it from looking like his pants are always going to fall off. So that's a good way to guarantee that, and so that's what I did there. In some ways, I feel like this guy is the culmination of a lot of figures I've worked on. I started sculpting on suits with the Deathstroke figure that I did over a year ago now. And then also coming to more recently, the Ghostmaker figure. I had to do a lot of internal elastic stuff as well on that guy. And so I feel like a lot of that experience altogether allowed me to make this knight the way he is and really be successful, not only with the sculpting on fabric, but also the engineering to preserve all of the articulation. I feel like there's a lot of figures where it's like you can get this type of detail, but they won't be able to bend their arms up or something like that. But he is able to do it all because of the way everything's set up internally. So now that we've talked about the engineering, run back to inspiration. I was looking at a lot of different things to understand what a futuristic knight would look like. I was looking at medieval armor, which obviously, we have a lot of plates, a lot of tiers, like tiered, plates that are stacking on top of each other. And so, very clearly a medieval theme. We have some nice swords, medieval theme. And then I was asking, what would it look like in the future? What does that mean? And so I pulled some inspiration from Warhammer. As you can see, we sculpted this nice sort of like alien futuristic skull on the shoulder pad. I felt like that was very Warhammer. Even making the armor gold feels a little Warhammer in some ways. I kept, this light, these lights glowing through, and that is very kind of cyberpunk, kind of Tron in some regards, trying to bring some pop of color. I didn't want him just to feel dull and metal and dirty. I wanted there to be some freshness and light to the character, and it felt, for a lot of the cyberpunk figures, I've been using the motif of black and red. And so to kind of expand this character out of the normal field of my cyberpunk designs, I said, okay, we're going to drop a lot of the black away. We're going to have, a different color as the primary. So we went with gold. And then, what will complement our gold? We'll have our silvers and we'll have our blues throughout the suit. And so even moving away from red and using the opposite of red, that being blue. we have these spikes on the shoulder here, as you can see, and that was directly inspired actually by the Last Night Megatron. He has a shoulder sort of collar pad with some spikes on it, and I always loved that little design because in some ways it's so totally useless, but it just looks so cool to have spikes on your shoulder. And so I was just like, or spikes on your collar. I was like, okay, we're going to keep that for sure. Having the bolts on here, I was looking at, there's this game called Apex Legends. There's a character called Mirage who has like a bunch of little bolts on his suit. And then I was also thinking about Wolfenstein as well. There's those alien or like those ancient tech suits that you put on that kind of look like this industrial metal with some bolts on them. And so I wanted, I was sort of taking inspiration from that and mimicking that with some of the bolts in design throughout the suit. And so there's a lot of different things I was thinking about. And finally, I actually added the wiring in as like my last step of sculpting. And the wiring was really my effort to sort of unite the theme and also add a different pop of color. Because without silver, if everything was just black and gold, it would look very dull. I needed some other metal to help stand out and create more contrast, but also being a unifying element. And so when I realized when I was weathering the suit that I'm dry brushing the gold with silver, then I was like, okay, since I have silver within sort of the color scheme already, but more as an accent, let's take that silver and use it to, bring some light and bring some extra depth and detail to the suit. So that's where the chrome silver comes from. So a lot of different ideas and themes that are sort of falling into this suit. And funny enough, as I look at him, he kind of looks like a Destiny character in some ways. This looks like a suit you could put together in the game with some shaders or something. But let's see. What was I oh, let's talk about the paint now. You kind of understand the construction of the suit. I'm not going to go over every piece one at a time. If you want to, pause the video, take a look at some of it. You can kind of understand what I've done here. But in terms of the paint, once I decided that it was going to be predominantly gold, like the hands, I had to go, how do I sort of tone this gold down? So I actually painted everything gold. I painted the skull and all that. The only thing I didn't paint was the blue, and then I just black washed everything. And so what that did was it actually put black back into a lot of the cracks and details of the figure. And it looks especially good on this skull here. You get it running through all those cracks and scratches, and I think that looks lovely. And that helps add this layer of dirt and grime to the suit, and also helps bring out a lot of the details in there. So everything got black washed, and then after that I had to repaint some gloss areas and stuff like that, and then I hit it with my blue and my silver. The silver bits I actually ended up washing over with some gunmetal later to mute the silver down, kind of similar to what I did with the sword. But yeah, just super, super fun. Hitting hitting all those blue with gloss too. And once again, playing with those different elements of materials. I've talked about it before with like some of my Batman figures and other customs. But in this case, with this guy, I think it's interesting because he's not dark. He's not a super dark character or using a lot of dark tones. He has some very bright colors. But instead now, how do we take advantage of the brightness? For the dark colors, we're going to mix our grays and our blacks and our glosses and our mattes in order to let you know the material difference. In this case, the difference of materials is actually very, very clear. But instead, we don't want everything to be too shiny. If everything's shiny, you're gonna lose the spectacle of it. And so we muted down our gold with the black wash so that you can still see the shine of the metal, but it's not so bright that it, takes away from the gloss of the blue. I want the blue to shine through. And so even the difference between metal and gloss, it reflects light differently. As you can see the light shining on that, glossy bit on the shoulder. The light here, gets dissipated by the metal, it kind of spreads. Whereas if you look at it in the gloss of the shoulder, you get that single focal point of light. And so even then, it does different things. And that just helps break the figure apart and lets you appreciate different aspects of him. So very, very fun. Just some other details like the boots, for instance. We have black gray and gloss black on the boots so that you get some different color, differences. And even these straps here, we have our matte black. Let me get the camera to focus. we have our matte black versus our black gray. A very slight tone difference, but you can see it. And so, you know, it's those little details that really count for the figure, that make him worth it. So, now that that's out of the way, I feel like that's been a pretty good breakdown for what I've done for the figure. The one other thing I do want to talk about in terms of the engineering is actually, so the bandolier is glued onto the top of the shoulder pad. It runs around back, and then it comes to a piece of elastic here. The elastic runs back to the top of the shoulder. What I have added is a second piece of elastic in there. And what that allows you to do is to slide the sword in, and so you get some weapon storage there, so you can pose him with his sword. But now I'm going to pause the video and come back once I've loaded him up with all his gear, because my guns have shoulder straps and stuff like that, so we can actually, I think, have him holding everything in his arsenal all at once. So give me a sec. And we're back. As you can see here, when he's kitted out, he can hold everything. We have his grenade launcher right here on the strap around his right shoulder. He's holding his hammer. We have his energy blade magneted into his arm. We also have his big pulse cannon sitting around the strap on his left shoulder, as well as his plasma pistol in his belt, and the sword on his back. And so, yeah, he can hold all of his weapons at once. I don't really know why he would need to do that. I mean, he's looking like Rambo here, coming out with everything strapped on him. But you can pose him up with all of his goodies. I'm going to try to just sort of pin that into between one of his grenades. It doesn't want to work, but it's okay. So he can hold everything on his person, and I think that looks pretty cool. I'm glad that I was able to have, you know, technically enough storage, if you count him holding a hammer in his hand, so that he can keep everything on him. And so now he's fully decked out and ready for war here. Oh man, it's just so fun. I really like this character a lot. I'm very proud of the suit and how everything came together. Yeah, just words can't describe it, honestly. This guy feels very satisfying because there is a lot of work put into him, and it was just such a fun challenge to create this guy and really do a lot with him too. And I think that's the most fun part, is that there is so many elements to him and so many skills that I've learned over the years that I was able to put into practice right here. And so, yeah, just a very fun character, and I think he looks awesome. I love all the details on him. I love the paintwork. Also, I'm going to throw this out here in case anyone is wondering how long something like this takes. This took me, I calculated roughly about 16 hours worth of work. I calculate about 8 hours worth of sculpting, and then another 8 hours worth of paint. And that doesn't even include sort of the time just to plan him out in my head, because there's a lot of sitting and thinking that comes with an original design. But, you know, for anyone who wants to mimic this, or even do kind of something similar in terms of the armor, you're looking at about 8 hours total. So or 8 hours of sculpting and 8 hours of paint total if you want to get some of these effects. So, yeah, thank you for watching this review. I'm so happy with him. Yeah, I'll be honest, I've had him done for like the last day and a half or so, and he's just been sitting on my desk waiting to get reviewed and have pictures taken, and I'll just stop by and I'll just look and kind of smile, because I'm very proud of how everything looked. Also, the skirt piece is from a Batman cape. I just cut it out and glued it to the belt. I realized that's like the one component I didn't talk about, so that's how you do that. But yeah, I think that concludes the review. I mean, there's a lot of details, and it's like I could go through every single piece of paint that was glossed and every single thing that was matte and every single thing that is blue or silver, but that's just a lot to go through, and I don't think you guys need like a step-by-step. I think the bigger thing, you know, from this video is, one, to understand the detail and the time, and as well as the process. And hopefully I explained that well. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about how to sculpt on fabric and sort of the work that needs to be done there. If I can leave you with any final thought in terms of sculpting, just remember that if you put painter's tape on something, your painter's tape in like your sculpt is going to take on some of the wrinkles from the suit underneath it. And so you will actually not only have to sand up top and smooth up top, but you're also going to have to sand under the armor as well in order to get like really smooth curves. So that's just something I want to throw out there. Just kind of be aware of, you know, if you want everything to fit very nicely, you're going to have to sand the bottoms out too so that the curves actually match 100%. So thank you all for watching. If you want to see more videos, obviously check out my channel. That's where more videos are. And if you want to see more regular-ish updates of the stuff I'm working on, as well as when commissions open, so if you have, ideas for original pieces or comic book figures, you're going to be wanting to follow my Instagram for that, because that's when I post up when I open. You get to see work in progress photos. I've been doing a series called Paint With Me, where I'm just sort of showing the different steps for the head sculpts that I'm painting. And so, yeah, just a lot of fun stuff going on there. And if you want to contact me or talk to me or just ask me any other tips, do it through the DMs. It's the best way. So if you want to find me on Instagram, my username is Tosh_customs. I'll put my username in the description of this video. And if that is too difficult, I also have a direct link to my profile in the About section of my YouTube channel. So you can find me there. And yeah, please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe. I always appreciate the support. And other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will catch you next time.